On the front page of the Indian Express in 2018, a report appeared in which the anti-terror squad reported that they received a complaint from a gentleman who was living in Dubai. This gentleman contacted ATS Mumbai and it was a panic call. He said that he had seen posts by his young nephew, his sister's son. Those posts were extremely violent in nature, which revealed to this gentleman that his nephew, his sister's son, had gotten steadily radicalized. Radicalization can happen and does happen, not just can happen. Radicalization happens in educational institutions because if the teacher holds a radicalized thought, he or she will impart it to the children. There have been more such cases than can even be listed in one go, where children are being radicalized within the school. So the first protective shield against radicalization is the family environment. Then come more protective shields. We need these efforts in the space of education. We need these efforts in the space of inskilling the youth in positive activities. And better, all of us have become contributors to this cause of how we pull back anybody we know in our spaces from negative forces, from negative energies, so that they may build meaningful life for themselves, meaningful lives and careers, care for themselves, care for their family. Radicalization is the process by which individuals are led to extreme thoughts and actions there is a possibility that these ideologies may lead to violence. And hence, radicalization is considered as a threat to peace and harmony globally. I will give you two examples in which radicalization was flagged in one case by the security forces and in second case by a parent. On the front page of the Indian Express in 2018, a report appeared in which the anti-terror squad reported that they received a complaint from a gentleman who was living in Dubai. This gentleman contacted ATS Mumbai and it was a panic call. He said that he had seen posts by his young nephew, his sister's son. Those posts were extremely violent in nature, which revealed to this gentleman that his nephew, his sister's son, had gotten steadily radicalized. He realized the gravity of the situation and he managed to connect with the anti-terror squad in Mumbai since the boy lived and continues to live in Mumbai. Through the anti-terror squad, a team was sent very gently to this young man's residence. They quietly interacted with him in a very reassuring manner so as not to disrupt the family life in any way, and also so that even the neighbors would not be aware. They went in civil clothes. The interaction continued for weeks and months, but all this time it was highly reassuring. It was done in a very gentle manner so that the neighbors would not get alarmed, the family would not get alarmed, but steadily the youth was led out of radicalization. The second case is from Mumbai. The second case I'm telling you is from Kashmir. This incident is part of one of the biggest bestsellers of 2019. The book is called Kashmir, The Conspiracy of Silence. In this book, the writer, Mr. Bashir Asad, writes of his own son, his elder son. He writes that his son was studying in NIT Srinagar, doing engineering, when he observed that on Facebook, his son had posted extremely violent videos. Now, as a father, he was shaken because he knew that sharing political ideology is one thing. But when his son started sharing such extremely violent videos on Facebook, he got alarmed and he observed his son more closely thereafter, because the son had not been speaking of these thoughts in his head. The posts continued to be violent. The father tried to withdraw his son from violent ideology, and with great effort, he managed to draw him back. But in the middle of all this, the son lost his focus. A very bright young man about whom the entire family predicted that he would go into the administrative services or he would be a highly qualified engineer, because he lost his focus to the forces of radicalization. Very valuable 3 to 4 years of his life were lost, and that led to, there are countless such cases where youngsters fall prey to such forces. Now the question is that why are the youngsters becoming vulnerable? Can we always say it is lack of employment? It is lack of alternate mainstream activities? Yes, these do play a role. The involvement of a youngster in sports, in mainstream social activities, in activities of higher education, in pursuing his education and his career, do play a role in keeping his thoughts channelized in the right direction. At the same time, these are not the factors which one may consider that they are foolproof to protect a youngster from radicalization. Let us understand that in Kashmir, the identity of a Kashmiri youth is exploited by forces inimical, opposed to the security of the country. So his identity as a Kashmiri is exploited, because if such a youngster is led into radicalization, then he is victimized. Then the movement or any action by such youngster is packaged as the struggle of a Kashmiri youth against the state. But here the youngster becomes the victim. He is not aware that he is being trapped. In addition to radicalization, how does this move into the destroying of the social fabric of the region? Kashmir is today one of the most vulnerable spots in the country where drug abuse is concerned. Drug abuse is alarmingly high. Even drug abuse is being used as a political tool by forces opposed to the integrity and sovereignty of India. Because once a youngster is radicalized, it is easier to make him cut off social contact with the positive and affirmative forces. Once he is led into addiction, it becomes so much easier for terror forces to then lead him to actions which may be against his will, but now his will has been compromised. All of us who are participating in this very meaningful dialogue today, we are stakeholders in this very important process of drawing back the youths from the process of radicalization. You will be surprised to know how much football, cricket have become popular in Kashmir in the last few years. These matches which you take for granted. You go out in your town, in your city, you go to a playground and you enjoy these matches. The youngsters in Kashmir did not have this liberty because the forces of terror were radicalizing them, leading them into stone pelting, leading them into violence. So these youngsters, they wanted to go out and play, but the play areas were controlled by terror forces, where the radicalized youth were then led into manufactured anger so that the situation would quickly deteriorate and they would get into stone pelting and further radicalization. So this becomes a highly vicious process. In the last few years, downtown Srinagar, Sopore, Pulwama, Baramulla, so many areas of Kashmir have seen a resurgence in sports. These youths are so happy to find spaces where they can channelize their energies in an affirmative direction. So sports becomes a very important tool to withdraw youths from spaces where their energies may be negatively channelized. Another important direction is skill giving. More and more efforts have been made in the last few years to involve youths in efforts where their energies are either channeled as entrepreneurs, or they are involved in the tourism industry, or they are involved in the horticulture industry, so that the forces of radicalization do not prey upon them. Now, what are these forces of radicalization? It is extremely sad. Youths who have been victims of radicalization themselves, they say that in many cases, even their parents were not aware that inadvertently they were radicalizing their children. And many parents realized this when perhaps it was too late. And many parents realized this in time. So yes, radicalization can also begin from the home environment. Radicalization can happen and does happen, not just can happen. Radicalization happens in educational institutions, because if the teacher holds a radicalized thought, he or she will impart it to the children. There have been more such cases than can even be listed in one go, where children are being radicalized within the school. Realizing the danger, other affirmative forces in the society have tried to withdraw children from these negative forces. Once a child goes beyond school or goes beyond college, he wants employment which can affirmatively engage him or her in action. That is where employment opportunities become very important to keep the energy of a youth channelized in the right direction. Once I was flying from Srinagar to New Delhi, and a young man sitting next to me on the flight was from North Kashmir, and he was telling me of his experiences. We got talking and he was telling me of his experience. And he said that, ma'am, you will be surprised to know that when I was a teenager, I used to consider myself as a very bright student, but I was completely isolated from the geopolitical realities of the world. He said the situation was that I had constructed a world in my head where only that world mattered, and I was absolutely divorced, cut off from the geopolitical contemporary reality. Then his parents, realizing that the child was intellectually isolated and he was intellectually not in a correct space, decided to send him to Delhi. And when he came to Delhi, he realized how limited his worldview was. And he said to me, ma'am, I was in such a vulnerable space that during that time, if somebody had managed to push me in the wrong direction, I would have got swept down that path. I would have lost my career. I would have lost my connect to my family. But because he was mainstreamed, he realized that his thoughts were teetering in the wrong direction, and he was able to pull himself back. Those who talk of radicalization, the most effectively are those who have been victims of this process. There is a young man in Baramulla, he's 40 years old now. For the last 6 years, he has been engaged in teaching poor children and orphans. He is educated himself, he's educated only till class 10. And this is a young man about whom his teachers would say, Ki, you can take from us in writing, that this boy is going to be a brilliant doctor. It was the 80s, the 90s, when this man, even he was a teenager at that time. But his thoughts were getting so radicalized in the school environment, in the open spaces, in the township, that he became a stone pelter. He became a very aggressive stone pelter. He even became an overground worker for a terror group, and he went to jail. Thrice he went to jail. During the time he was in jail, his going into jail, coming back from jail, his father, because he was the eldest of the family, the darling of his father died of a heart attack. His father could not bear the pain of seeing his eldest son, his life destroyed in this way. The teenager whom his friends would call Einstein, because he was so bright and he wanted to be a doctor. His life was destroyed coming in and out of jail. The father passed away, and this young man told me, he said, Didi, after so many years I realized that my poor father, he did not know that inadvertently his talk was leading me to radicalization. What I was reading in the local newspapers was radicalizing me. What I was hearing in the open spaces of our township, standing among people, was radicalizing me. How did he get saved? Because he was always very fond of reading. And when he was in the jail at Udhampur, he was taken to Udhampur in jail. And when he was in jail, when he interacted with the lady who was in charge of the jail superintendent, she realized that this boy is always reading. Then she started interacting with him, and when the realities of life opened up to him, he realized that he had been played like a pawn. On a chessboard you have pawns. So he had just been played. He had just been used as a tool by some people who wanted to package the so-called conflict in Kashmir as an indigenous conflict. And he had been used in that way. He said, not just him, so many youngsters have told me that their own friends, they lost their friends from school, they lost their friends from college, they were killed, they died because they were radicalized and they could not be pulled back from that path. So many forces have to come together to save our youths from radicalization, to give them back their life so that they can live with their family as happy individuals. They can pursue their careers. They can pursue meaningful lives. You will be happy to know that every year now, so many batches of children are sent out from Kashmir for interaction with people in the rest of the country. And when they come to the other parts of India, these children realize that they had been fed wrong notions about their own country. They had been fed wrong notions about people in the rest of the country. That in the rest of the country also people are happy, they are welcoming, they are inclusive. And when these youngsters go back, they become ambassadors in their own way. And they tell their friends that the notions that we picked up were wrong. Our country is inclusive, it is progressive. So why is so much money being spent on taking delegations of school children, of college children, year after year, month after month, taking them to other parts of India? Why is so much money and effort going into skilling the youngsters? Why is so much money and effort going into sports activities in the valley? You shall be very happy to know that all over Kashmir, playgrounds have come up. Youths are taking up so many sports in the smallest of areas. Cricket matches, football matches, even kabaddi matches are being organized so that youths become more and more involved in mainstream activities. Can you imagine any place where a football match is halted in the middle? The match is halted because the audience is so much that more and more people are coming into the stadium and they want the match to be halted because they don't want to miss it. This is the power of de-radicalization efforts. When the collective effort goes into putting youths in affirmative channels of finding their future, of channelizing their energy. Yes, the threat is still there. Yes, we face this threat to national security. We face this threat to peace and harmony in Kashmir and in other parts of the country where youths may be deliberately led to thoughts and actions which are violent in nature. Let us understand that we are a democratic nation. We give space to our youths to have ideologies, political ideologies of the kind that they want to. A democracy can function only with independent and positive thinking. But this thinking cannot go into negative shades. I was once hosting the Pahalgam Media Summit. We were in Pahalgam, and a youngster in the audience got up and he started abusing the Indian nation. So we were surprised and we asked that youngster that, okay, you have a chance to speak as a member of the audience, but why should you use this opportunity to start abusing the Indian nation? He said, the democracy, the Indian democracy gives me the freedom to stand here and abuse the nation. Yes, the Indian democracy gives him the freedom, but every person in that audience knew that the youth has radicalized thought. It becomes very easy then to trap such youngsters and lead them to anti-national activities. It is very heartening, it is very encouraging that it is the people of Kashmir who are our biggest bulwark against these negative forces. They are the ones now telling their youngsters that you cannot go, you cannot take your thought in wrong directions, which will disrupt social peace and harmony. Radical thought more and more is getting weakened. The space is being taken by positive and affirmative forces. Why were there media headlines about downtown Srinagar becoming a happy place for football? Can you imagine that in Chennai or in Kolkata or in Mumbai or in Delhi, national headlines should be made that a certain area is celebrating football? No, we take it for granted. Why not? But in downtown Srinagar, it made national headlines. On all media houses, they carried stories, they carried reports that youngsters are playing football. They're playing, and in the summer, they would be playing football till 11 o'clock, till 12 o'clock at night with floodlights. Because when positive forces come in, downtown Srinagar was an area where stone pelting would happen. Before you knew it, the youngsters were pelting stones. And now you ask them, why were you pelting stones at that time? They just say, because we didn't know better. We thought this was the way to be. We thought we were doing the right thing. How easy it was then to influence such a youngster and take him further on the terror path. But today those youngsters are thankful that their lives are engaged in a more meaningful direction. There is so much thrust on entrepreneurial activities in Kashmir, because when youngsters get engaged in these activities, then their mind space gets occupied by positive and affirmative thinking. Then they are constructing their lives. Then they don't say, I don't care. I don't, as in the language of youngsters, then they're not in the mind space where they're saying, I don't give a damn about life. What does life carry for me? I'm going to throw stones. I'm going to get into street violence. I don't give a damn. But now they care. Now they're getting into activities where their energies are engaged. Yes, more needs to be done. We all are aware. Societies are never perfect. They are always an effort of a lot of people to bring positive energies together. A lot more needs to be done. Parents need to be more vigilant. When we started this session, I told you of a man who was living in Dubai and he saw his sister's son posting very violent content on Facebook. This is how more and more families need to become vigilant. The young boy, the boy's father, now, he was about 16, 17 years old at that time. His own father was not aware because the father was not on Facebook. He was not aware what his son was posting. The mother was not aware of what the son was posting. But fortunately, the boys, in our language, we say his mamu, his mother's brother, observed what the child was posting, and he withdrew him back. Of the case that I told you in Srinagar, the writer who wrote that book, filed The Conspiracy of Silence. He observed what his son was posting and he withdrew him back. So the first protective shield against radicalization is the family environment. Then come more protective shields. We need these efforts in the space of education. We need these efforts in the space of instilling the youth in positive activities. So more and more of these forces are coming together. It is wrong to assume that the entire onus is upon the family, or the entire onus is upon the state, or the entire onus is upon the education system, or the entire onus is upon any other segment. Life is always a cohesive whole as in WHOL. All these forces have to come together collectively. A man who is today the editor of a newspaper in Srinagar, the editor of Heaven Mail in Srinagar, he told me, he said, Didi, he's the eldest of his family. And it was very easy during the 80s, during the 90s for any youngster to feel radicalized in his thought. He just came to Jammu. He had never come to Jammu. So by the time he was about 16, 17, he visited Jammu for the first time. And he came to Jammu only for 15 days. He had this short winter break and he came to Jammu. And when he came to Jammu, he realized that the notions that had been fed to him by his environment, by his peer group, by the home environment, by the school, he realized when he came to Jammu that people here are equally happy. They are normal human beings like we are. They have normal aspirations like they have back in Kashmir. He says, Didi, I stayed back in Jammu. For 6 months, I refused to go back. He enjoyed himself so much. And then Iqbal Bhai, this gentleman, he says he became the ambassador for rational thought in his own peer group when he went back. Then whenever he used to hear any radicalized thought, he would stop them. Wrong. This is wrong. He became a major influencer for his own family. This is how collectively a society works towards de-radicalization. I want to underline how a radicalized youth becomes so much more vulnerable to be pushed into drug abuse, to be pushed into violent activities. Why is it would make you extremely sad to know that over the last few years, for over about 10 years, mothers and fathers, parents have been going to police officers and saying, we beg of you, please put our child behind jail. We beg of you. Because he has become a drug addict. There is so much violence in the house. So the police officers were taken aback by the parents coming and saying. And when these cases were investigated, it was found that these youths had been radicalized. They had been isolated from the home environment. They had been pushed into drug abuse. And now it was very easy to push these youths into also violent activities against the state. But yes, now we see more and more actions where a society is collectively recognizing the values of living in peace, in harmony, in not giving space to the forces of radicalization. This struggle continues. It is not over. No society is perfect. We all are putting in our energies to make our world a happier place to be in. And WishwaTalks, which has, they have invited me for this session and all of you have joined in. All of us are also making that effort to understand this phenomenon better. All of us have become contributors to this cause of how we pull back anybody we know in our spaces from negative forces, from negative energies, so that they may build meaningful life for themselves, meaningful lives and careers, care for themselves, care for their families.